Welcome to SatNuts, the podcast. I'm your host, Drew Klein, VP of CCOM Satellite Systems. What is a SatNut? SatNuts are the shrewd, engaging characters from the space and SATCOM business. Yes, they do exist. This podcast is where we discuss past decisions, current markets, and future endeavors. This podcast is brought to you by Excelerate Technology Group. Excelerate is a global market leader in the provision of data, video, voice, and internet via satellite and wireless solutions to emergency services and government organizations. Through innovative and seamless integration of the company's products and services, Excelerate enable its customers the ease, freedom, and security to rapidly deploy resilient and reliable communications anytime, anywhere. The company is headquartered in Cardiff, Wales, but has offices and subsidiaries in France, United Arab Emirates, Australia, and in the United States. Visit their website at www.excelerate-group.com. That's www.excelerate-group.com. Welcome to episode 00003. I actually wanted this one to be our first podcast episode because our guest, David Savage, Excelerate Technology Group, was actually CCOM's very first reseller. Unfortunately, I blew it. It all worked out in the end. We had a great conversation. David is the founder, the group executive chairman at Excelerate Technology Group. He is a fantastic character. Smart as a whip, can't get anything by him. The guy is more than a satellite nut. He's a pilot, he's a family man, former record producer, son of a miner, barroom brawler. I might have made that one up. He's also a SATCOM emergency response pioneer, certainly relevant in today's day and age. Excelerate is the UK market leader in the provision of communication data for blue light vehicles. He's a great guest and super interesting guy, longtime CCOM partner. I think we had a fun and open discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, let's get nuts with our guest, David Savage. Hello, mate.
Hello, Drew. How are you?
Good. How's it going?
Yeah. So which one of us gave who COVID-19 then?
Oh, that is a very, very interesting question because I was just about to ask you. I said, okay, in hindsight, we probably should not have gone to the DC show. In hindsight.
Yeah.
So, do you know anybody who caught it? I mean, without revealing who they are. I mean, did you hear about anybody?
No. I mean, there were plenty of people who didn't make it. Certainly, those coming from Europe. So, the ESA guys, etc. And I that the difficulty is, I'm kind of. We had, governments had played this down, and still a lot of people were saying, what's the problem? It's just flu, and it's obviously a lot more serious than just flu, isn't it? So, yeah, you're right. With the benefit of hindsight, probably shouldn't have gone. But we would have needed a really good reason not to go because we had some real interesting things on our agenda, and funny enough, in particularly, all to do with this pandemic, we were moving into kind of healthcare applications generally anyway. So, command vehicles, fine, that's our core business, but we're doing hundreds and hundreds of ambulances in terms of turning them into smart ambulances, so different kinds of technology, etc. And I desperately want us to get into connectivity and other applications as well for care homes and GP surgeries and stuff like that. I just think and this is, people are looking at this current crisis and there are going to be some lessons learned, and we will all work differently, and other professions will work differently as well as a result of it. So, big game changer.
Yeah, there's a lot of money being thrown into our business now. It's insane, the amount of money and the caliber of people that are getting into our business. These big players in the tech world are it's a little nerve-wracking to see these guys who are some of the richest in the whole world right now, whether it's Bezos or Zuckerberg or Musk or whoever, starting to dip their toe, actually not even really dip their toe. They're kind of doing cannonballs into our pool that is the Satcom world. Does that make you a bit nervous to think that, maybe these guys are, because we're already starting to see some of the epic failures, whether it's OneWeb or Leosat or any of these new. Does that make you a bit concerned to see those kinds of investments being made? Because it doesn't always work out.
So the answer is not at all for me, because we're applications driven. So I don't get up every morning and do cartwheels because I think, I'd love to own a teleporter. I'd love to own a spacecraft. I leave that to the big boys. I want them to put those networks in place. I want those networks to be everywhere. And I then don't think at all that they can do the kind of bespoke things which, don't get me wrong, I think Bezos and I think, Musk, etc., they could become the enemy for the mobile networks, potentially. But generally speaking, at the moment, they're going to be operating in areas where the mobile networks can't find an economical model to operate anywhere. In terms of geographical locations, the population centers are still going to need. So the major cities are still going to be using 4, 5G. So that's the territory of the mobile phone networks. And in those city areas, the LEOs might not, and I know there's a lot of talk about where the elevations are going to be, so it's almost going to be straight up, so maybe you can see between skyscrapers and so forth. But I really think that in the cities we're going to be using 5G, and then when we step outside of our cities, when we start seeing those 5G services tested in terms of coverage, that's when those LEO networks will come into play. And I think the other thing is, and we are talking to all of these people, I see great opportunities for us. And I kind of see us as still being in a niche marketplace. So emergency responders, government applications, etc. The sort of stuff, frankly, that Elon Musk probably can't be bothered with. Bezos can't be bothered with because it's too messy and it's too bitty. And actually, those clients, when you talk to them, they always want something different as well. They don't want something that's just off the shelf. They'll want the network. That's absolutely fine. But the network's just the network. Let's assume the networks exist anyway. It's what you can do on the network which makes the difference. And that's something we realized from, we probably near enough went broke at least a dozen times between 2001 and 2006. I don't think we made any money actually for 5 or 6 years. In fact, we lost money consistently for those periods of time. I had to sell 2 houses to keep our business going during that period of time. But I think I'd got to the point where, once you're getting so deep, it's too late to bail out. And I'm glad we didn't, is the truth. But lots of people probably wouldn't have been able to afford to stay the distance, or I'm too stubborn, or whatever the reasons are. But the fact of the matter is we came through that period. But it was probably around about 2005, 4 years after we started the business, that I really began to realize that what the client really wanted was someone to just do everything. They didn't want to deal with someone else who was operating satellites, and they didn't want to deal with somebody else who was doing this bit. They actually wanted an end-to-end provider who could do all of that stuff and manage the networks and all the rest of it. And that's why really I think we changed the business. And when people say, well, what differentiates Excelerate, David, the story I tell really is that we're an interesting or unusual blend of inventor developer. We actually do invent stuff, and we have patents, and we own IP. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, Drew. So you're a great example of, the amount of times that, why don't you develop your own satellite platform for trucks and stuff like that? No, because you guys do that really well. Why the hell do we want to reinvent the wheel? But we want to do all the other stuff.
There's a method to my madness for wanting to do the first SatNuts podcast with you. And that's because as I'm sure you might remember, or maybe you don't, but 15 years ago, Excelerate was CCOM's first reseller partner. And in this business, like in most businesses, you can't do it on your own. You have to work with somebody who has more expertise in certain areas than you, that can make your life easier and make your business better and make your customers happier. And so, like all partnerships, we have our ups and downs. Things go, whether it's a marriage or a business association, things go up and down. Hopefully they go more up than they go down. But so how do you feel that your relationships with your partners has influenced your business?
Very dramatically. It's there's not just you that we've been working with for this amount of time. We're very, very loyal. That doesn't mean to say that we mustn't look around. I can remember the very early days, Drew, and you might not even know this, but actually, when your father and I first started doing business together, and we wanted to bring CCOM platforms into the UK. And I don't care what our competitors say. The bottom line is we introduced this concept to the emergency services, certainly in Europe, in terms of using satellite on incident command vehicles, so that these mobile officers could do something for a change. Instead of just being there on a number of wheels and you had a whiteboard on a command vehicle. Oh, you could definitely make a cup of tea. How about we actually turn these things into proper mobile headquarters, where everything you do in your city centre office, you can do anywhere you send the vehicle. And I didn't want to go down the military route. So, we did look at the market at the time in terms of satellite antennas manufacturers that were around. And I didn't want to go down the broadcast road either, because in those two marketplaces, it seemed to me that the customers in those marketplaces had a lot more money available to buy stuff than the emergency responder market. I think people make the mistake of thinking because the emergency first responders are government funded that they've got more money than sense, and it's absolutely the opposite. Budgets are extraordinarily tight in those sectors. That's my experience. And we looked around and we found these guys in Canada called CCOM, and we thought and look, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you were at the right price point. You're not a cheap product or a cheap manufacturer, but you're not the most expensive either, and it was actually very well engineered. So to me, that's a great combination of well engineered, last the test of time. And by the way, we've got customers. We've still got original customers using CCOM platforms, and they've had them over 15 years, and they still work like clockwork. Okay?
That's awesome. I know, that's great. And I see the pictures in the UK, especially during the current COVID crisis, of these ambulances that are roaming around the island with our kit and your gear and your support, and it's so great to see our mutual solutions helping out in these dire situations.
Yeah. So the CCOM thing was, for us, it was the right combination. But look, it was a difficult road in the early days. It was difficult for us because I wrong guests. You know what?
I heard the stories. I heard the stories, man. The stories are great, and the stories are rich, and they are they're unique. And I kind of came into it shortly after the partnership was on a kind of an up or a down. It was heading down, and I'm a different kind of a person than my father. Who's a very, very strong and forthright businessman. And I think you and him are very similar, and that's why you put two bulls of the same caliber, in the ring, and they're going to just keep butting heads. And sometimes you need to get a guy with a red cape in there to break it up. But and that's why I see these partnerships. This was a relatively new concept for me to understand, was how to work as a manufacturer between a reseller partner and just try to help the partner work with his end customer, and don't get in the way, and don't police between partners. let them handle their own business. That seems to be a big issue in any manufacturing side. Do you see that a lot where you are competing with people in your on the island there? Do you finding a lot of competition, aggressive competition between each other?
I think probably. I mean, it's interesting that I think you're the calming influence in the family part of CCOM, and my daughter has the same role in my business. So generally, if your father and I were in the process of falling out, we'd just hand it over to you and Nicola to square up and everything, and peace would break out. It would be great. But and look, we're all different. I've come up the hard way, so my kids have been very well educated. I've had a number of businesses. My dad was a miner, for Christ's sake. So there's no silver spoon here. We started the business. I've started a number of businesses, done reasonably well, but I've never had anything to fall back on, no family money, etc. So maybe I do take things more personally than I should. I'm hoping as I get older, I'll mellow a bit, but there's no sign of it yet.
I see it. I see it. No. I see it, man. I see not just like guys like you and Leslie mellowing, but maybe some of your grit and hard assness being pushed off towards people like Nicola and I. Just to let everybody know that Accelerate is a family business, in as much as it is a global enterprise. Your daughter Nicola and your wife Judith are working there, and have been there since the very beginning, I believe. Is there somebody I'm missing that's also from your family that works at Accelerate?
Yeah, so Mark, my son, is in the business, and he should be furloughed because he actually helps operate our French yacht business, our maritime business. So we have a similar business, but in a different market, in the yacht market. And of course, the whole of France is in lockdown at the moment. So I've got French employees who can't go to work, customers who can't move their boats, etc., etc. So that's kind of a bit difficult. But I just going back to, because I didn't quite finish, and then I want to come back to the family thing because that's quite important as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned the competitor thing, and the kind of the ethos there. The problem I've got always, Drew, is very difficult. I see us as a developer and a pioneer, and there's nothing annoys someone more than actually developing a market, and then someone who didn't go through the school of hard knocks comes along and says, "Oh, I think I'll just copy that. You must have the same, for goodness sakes, in your business." And I'll probably never feel easy about that. Now, what I've always said is that in a fair fight, or because that's sometimes what it is, or a bid or a tender or whatever. Look, at the end of the day, if someone wins a deal from us because they were better than we are, or they gave the customer advantages that we couldn't give, whatever those advantages were, then there's not a lot I can say about that. But I've always said that, if a customer writes the technical specification of sometimes very complex projects, by the way, these integration things, this is way beyond just sticking a satellite platform on a vehicle. It's all the back office integration. It's inventing apps for them, inventing user interfaces so that ordinary people called paramedics, police officers, and fire officers, who shouldn't need to be tech savvy or IT savvy, can actually go about their day job and everything will just absolutely work first time in these mission critical environments. That's really, really important. So, I do have very strong feelings about that. And as long as it's a level playing field, I'm comfortable with it. And as long as those competitors actually are up to the job and they support those clients the way they should. Otherwise, I get very annoyed about it and I can't help my feelings about it.
Well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, I guess they say. So, it's one of those things where for us, it's the same. We see a lot of, antenna manufacturers coming along and, building product. We were one of the first, if not the first, to do what we do. So we've been fighting this off the whole time and on a global scale. And so we understand that. And I guess, but when it comes to competition, you know, it's really one of those things where you don't mind some decent competition, somebody who's making a high quality product or
Yeah,
offering a high quality service. And you don't mind butting heads with somebody like that because you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. But at the same time, there is an ethics involved, and there is a quality issue involved, and those guys who don't perform to up to snuff, whether it's performing with a high quality service or offering a high quality product, I mean, they just go away eventually. So you
yeah.
don't really have to worry about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Drew, you mentioned earlier on, there's been quite a lot of press, obviously, everywhere about COVID-19, and clearly the things that have happened in the UK are we've set up this 4,000 bed temporary hospital in London's Excel, and our customers are there. They are part of the command regime there, and I describe these as our command vehicles are there. They're the customers, really, but I'm so passionate about this. I regard them as our vehicles. The vehicles you've seen on TV and in the press are our vehicles with your product on. And by the way, those vehicles go back all the way to 2007. Okay, they're still working.
Damn it. It's this damn planned obsolescence that we haven't figured out yet. We're supposed to make we make them too well because, ideally they should, explode after 6 to 8 years, but we made them too damn well. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
So, don't get me wrong, they get technical refreshers, and that doesn't, come on, you've upgraded controllers and software and stuff like that. So they'll have had all of that, but the general principle of what we supplied in 2007 is still there. It just gets a periodic technical refresh. Yeah. They're working now because the solution was right at the beginning. The integration was right at the beginning. And then the support that's continued since 2007 has also been right as well. So, a sustainable business model, we are required to make money so we can provide these levels of service. I'm not, I'm unapologetic about that. Not everybody sees that. I think it's easier in the emergency services because obviously they appreciate that what they're doing is mission critical. So, but don't get me wrong, the front line appreciate it, but that doesn't necessarily apply to the bean counters who are signing off the procurement side of things. They just look at things a lot more starkly and look at the pricing and say, well, what? I can't see why that would be more expensive compared to that. And that's because they don't know our business and they don't know lots of things actually. Right. But that's, that boils down to the right levels of customer engagement at the beginning. So we understand what they want. And that's really important as well, because as I say, we're a developer. So we're developing stuff in tandem with our clients. I would I'd love to say we've come up with some great ideas, but the vast majority of great ideas were actually our customers' ideas in the first place. We're just the people who translate them.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Seacom Satellite Systems. Seacom is a pioneer and world leader in the mobile auto-pointing satellite antenna business. The company has sold more than 9,000 systems into over 100 countries. The product line includes vehicle-mounted driveaways, transportable case-based flyaways, backpack man-pack antennas, and fixed motorized products. All come with Seacom's proprietary iNet View controller system, which enables users to find broadband via satellite with just the push of a button. Seacom is also in late-stage development, partnered with the University of Waterloo, of a revolutionary Ka-band electronically steerable phased array antenna technology that has the potential to forever change the antenna business. The company is publicly traded on the Canadian Venture Exchange under the symbol CMI and on the US OTC under the symbol CYSNF. Visit the website at www.c-comsat.com. That's www.c-comsat.com. So obviously the UK has had interesting moments during this COVID crisis. You had Boris, your prime minister, near death, the country dealing with the political implications of Brexit. So what is the feeling that you feel on the ground there in the UK? Are the public losing it, or are they being obedient serfs, or are they being inflammatory belligerents? Like, what's going on over there in the UK? What do you see on the ground?
Well, the Brits aren't like the French. We don't tend to have revolutions here. So I think we're pretty patient. We're pretty easygoing. We're not the kind of people that blockade and protest and stuff like that, unless it's really bad. So obviously we've had our share of protests about the environment and stuff like that, as people lose patience with that. But again, this is just, tomorrow will be the start of week 5. So it's getting interesting. It's also interesting that the weather has been unusually good here in Britain for a while. So I think, there are a lot of employees, a lot of workers who are furloughed. So they're receiving 80% of their salaries is paid for by the government, up to a maximum of £2,500 a month. So for some of those people that are receiving that, they're probably, frankly, some of them are quite enjoying the time off. And I'm risking some people protesting when I say that, but look, this is the real world. There are lots of people who don't enjoy their jobs, lots of people who are actually enjoying time with their families. And I know it's a terrible reason why it's all happening, but the bottom line is some people are seeing their families, a lot more of the families, and that's probably not a bad thing.
Right. But it's not a normal thing, right? I mean, we have to at some point return to what was normal,
Yeah.
And so when do you see that happening? I mean, do you have any idea or thoughts about a timeline, or in your mind that you see what's going on for the UK?
So our Prime Minister Boris Johnson allegedly is back to work tomorrow, which is, what's the date tomorrow? That's the God, I haven't got my date here. I've lost track of time. Is it the 25th or the 26th of April? So Boris is back, and certainly one of his key questions and the pressure he is under from business is, what's the plan to get Britain back to work? Now, it's okay, everyone's saying, well, we can't risk further infection. And I agree, by the way. So human life comes first, unlike some of the things that have been said in some quarters. Lots of people are experiencing tragedy at the moment and will experience further tragedy. So very, very important that we do everything we can to protect life.
David, one of my favorite questions to ask is, who is your first boss? I'll tell you why. Most of the serial entrepreneurs in our business, I guess any business, really have no business answering to anyone. And it's obviously, we could get hyperbolic and say, we all have our bosses, whether it's your spouse or a bank or a deity. But I'm of the belief that the first job you have, the first meaningful boss that you have, has an enormous impact on you. So who was your first boss, and what impact did he or she leave on you?
I don't think I'm your typical or serial entrepreneur, although don't get me wrong, I've wanted to run my own business as long as I can remember. But I couldn't understand why people would maybe have a good job and take their life savings or get made redundant, because there's all sorts of reasons people start in business, and put everything on the line, put their houses on the line, work all the hours that God sends for something that doesn't have much of an upside. So I was always very, very patient. So, I did the usual thing, went to grammar school, got my qualifications, didn't want to go to the university, couldn't see the point of that, wanted to get into sales. So my first job actually was a trainee export manager with a tailoring group, very large tailoring group in the UK that made suits. And I was a trainee export manager for that business. And my first boss was a guy called Colin Byrne. And we had a whale of a time, and I was a young guy, and it was all really good fun. Not what I wanted to do. And then I went through a series of jobs because, again, I was being patient. I hadn't found the right thing for me, or anything that could kind of give me the inspiration I needed to put everything on the line. And I actually, by the time So my first job was at 18. And then I got a job when I was about 25, I think, which I regard as my first proper job. It was the first job I really loved and became very career minded. And it was an American multinational. It was a technology company. And I'd worked for a bank before as well. So I'd had a series of really good jobs. So I never was wanting for a good job. As I say, I always wanted to do my own thing, but I just never found the thing that could persuade me to put everything on the line. And so I worked for that technology company, and that was probably by then 1985. So this was the very start of the mobile phone boom, by the way. So the cellular phone industry started in the UK in 1985. And I tried to persuade my then boss at this American multinational technology company to get into the mobile phone business. And his name was Bill Cole. And he said to me, he said, okay, David, he said, well, go off and do some research and come back. And if you can convince me this is a good idea, maybe we'll have a look at it within the UK company. And I went back and I did my presentation. I must have done a really crap job because at the end of my presentation, bear in mind, I'm trying to persuade him to take the business I was employed by into the new mobile phone industry. And at the end of my presentation, my American boss, who was a fatal combination of he was an American and an accountant, and his words to me about the mobile phone industry right at the start of the mobile phone revolution in 1985-86, he turned around to me, he said, gee, bud, he said, you know what I think? I think this is going to be a real damp squib. This is going to be just like CB. And with those words, he killed the whole idea that was going into the mobile phone business. But at that point in time, I'd worked for that company for about 4 years. I was going places. I was a senior manager and probably would have become the sales director in the UK. But I sat down and I thought, this is lunacy. I'm working for a guy, and I love the guy to death, but I'm working for a guy who actually thinks the mobile phone industry is going to be just like CB.
It's amazing how wrong some of our projections, and not to pick on your old boss, and we've all made some projections that have just been so dead wrong, and it's a real strike to the ego to come back and admit later how dead wrong one can be in such a massive scale, where you could say that the cellular phone industry is going to be like CB, or it reminds me of Paul Krugman, who's a famous economist, who said that the internet was going to have as much effect on the world as the fax machine. Just dead wrong. And it's interesting to go back and look at these projections and gather your humility in a pile and put it in the corner for later.
Yeah. So to finish that story, which I didn't want to be a long story, but you asked me a question first, boss, and so there were two memorable bosses really for me. My first one and that particular one. And that particular one, that American accountant, and as I say, he was a dear friend of mine, and until he died, he was a dear friend of mine. But I was convinced he was wrong. And one of the companies that helped me with my research about the mobile phone business, when I presented to him, I got disenchanted with my job with my American technology company because I just thought he was playing wrong. It was just absolutely crackers. And one of the companies that helped me with my research actually employed me, gave me a job because they could see I was very keen on this new emerging mobile phone technology. And so I joined that business company, a big public company in the UK called Granada Group. And within 2 weeks of me joining the company, my new boss, not the guy who interviewed me, but my new boss in my new job, his first words to me in first meeting me were, David, I don't think we should have gone into the mobile phone business. And I went home pretty distraught, actually, because I'd given up a pretty good job with an American corporation, and I'd moved into this new emerging mobile phone business. And I had to explain to my wife that maybe I'd made a bit of a serious career blunder by moving to this mobile phone company because I have a new boss who doesn't think we should have gone into it in the first place. And I had 6 months of listening to this crap from this idiot about the mobile phone business. And I was kind of the black sheep of this group of companies, and every month I'd go to a management meeting. They'd have all these successful general managers of different divisions, and I'd be the black sheep of the family in the mobile phone business, and they just plainly didn't want to be in it. But instead of getting a job somewhere else, I decided to ring the group managing director of this particular business, a bloke called Bill Andrews, and I said, Bill, it's clear that you don't want to be in the business, so if you don't have the stomach for it, if you're going to sell it or if you're going to close it, will you sell it to me? And he said, David, he said, if you can show me that you can get the funds together to buy this business off us, you're absolutely right. This is probably not a business for us. If you can show you can fund this thing, I'll sell the business to you. And that's exactly what I did. So in 1986, I bought the business. I put my house on the line. I remortgaged my house because actually I was so convinced that this was going to be a big industry that was kind of the catalyst for me that made it worth putting everything on the line, because although the downsides were the same, you still lost your house if you went broke, but the upsides were extreme. And I ended up buying a business for not a huge amount of money. I'll be frank about it. I think I paid £136,000 for a business with 7 employees. And 10 years later, I sold it to Vodafone Group for £42 million, and we had 450 employees. So
Wow.
I guess I got the bit, certain elements of that right.
Would you
And
say would you say that was your biggest professional victory? That accomplishment?
No, actually, funny enough, because I ended up, when I sold the business to Vodafone, at the point I sold it, I actually hated it. And I hated it because the industry had changed. We'd become a consumer business. And I'm not a great fan of consumer businesses. I like business to business. I wasn't in control of our own destiny either. And in reality, I was simply a reseller for the mobile phone networks. We weren't adding value. We weren't doing anything spectacular. And it had become pretty tedious and had become a bit of a treadmill. And so for 10 years, although I grew that business into a significantly large business, it wasn't making any money. The only people that were making any money out of it were actually the retailers, the people with the shops on the high street, and the mobile phone networks themselves. And us in the middle weren't actually making any money, and that became pretty tedious. So at the time I sold the business, I was actually very glad to get out of it. We did okay, that's fine, but I'd kind of lost my mojo, and I was looking for something else. So the business I'm in now, it's interesting because that business I sold after 10 years. Accelerate Technology is a business I founded in 2001. So we've been going nearly 20 years, and there's not a day in that 19, 20 years that hasn't been exciting or hasn't been interesting. And that to me is the really important thing, because we're a combination of 4 things, which I think is important. We're an inventor. We do actually invent and develop stuff. We're an integrator, and a bloody good integrator at that. It's important that things we sell actually work and are fit for purpose. We're a maintainer. I believe that we should look after the things that we sell throughout the contract period for the life of the contract. And then we're a network operator as well, or a virtual network operator, because that's important as well. Because if the stuff that we sell and provide is then let down by the networks themselves that they operate over, then that's not a great existence either. So the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that actually we make money. I think we're a good employer. We look after our people. We've stood the test of time and quite a few challenges. So it's interesting to see, what's happening with this COVID crisis. In some parts of our business, in fact, in our main business, we're absolutely, my senior team are absolutely flat out. We're flat out supporting customers through the crisis because it's first responders. But we're also flat out with some new opportunities that have come along as well. So I think the way we do business, I think the way we look after people, I think healthcare is going to change dramatically. And if we're shrewd and if we're clever and smart and we're innovative and we take some risks as well, I think there's a whole new world out there that we can capitalize on.
So there are some positive impacts from this current debacle for certain verticals like telemedicine and mobile education and maybe government emergency response. We should, though, expect to see a number of businesses go under. Speedcast comes to mind. So who in the supply chain for the SATCOM industry do you expect will take the biggest hit during this crisis? Will it be the operators, the service providers, manufacturers, system integrators? Who's going to take the biggest hit?
Isn't it bizarre or ironic that a few months ago the likes of Speedcast would be, sending out lots of PR about what a fantastic job they're doing with, Carnival Cruise Lines or whoever. I may have got the wrong cruise line, by the way, but so the big cruise ships are consuming bandwidth like it's going out of fashion in terms of satellite capacity, etc. But of course, the big cruise lines at the moment aren't doing anything. They're idle and they're not using that capacity, and therefore they don't want to pay for it. And then, of course, the other sector that Speedcast appear to have been overexposed to as well is oil and gas. The oil industry is paying people to take oil off its hands because they can't store the stuff they're producing at the moment. So for poor old Speedcast, it's been kind of a perfect storm in terms of two really big sectors of their business that have been hit very badly. But then again, I'm also inclined to say, I've looked at Speedcast. In fact, Speedcast supply us with capacity for our Australian business. And it's, again, ironic that Speedcast, the reason we deal with Speedcast is that they bought a company called Newsat in Australia, who were our network supplier, our capacity supplier in Australia. And they were a small company and they were fantastic people, but they went broke and Speedcast mopped them up and picked them up, and Speedcast became our supplier. And it's funny what goes around comes around, as they say. But then Speedcast really went on an acquisition spree, and I've thought for quite a while that at some point in time they're going to catch some indigestion from all these acquisitions.
It's an interesting term, indigestion, when you consider the inorganic growth that they were experiencing, and it could only last so long, right?
Yeah. So, typical company that's either funded by VCs or private equity, or in their case, public offerings, etc. These businesses have no idea how to grow businesses organically. Right? They never do. I talk to private equity and venture capitalists on a fairly regular basis. It's not because I necessarily want to do anything with them, but I might one day. But one of the first things these guys talk to you about when you go and talk to them is, well, what advantage can they bring to the party? If we don't just bring money, David, we can help you with acquisitions. And I look at them and think, well, why do I want to go on an acquisition spree when there's plenty of organic growth in things that we actually understand really well? But when you go public, the rules are different, and you have to keep growing, otherwise the shareholders get cross. You can't have a CEO who can be like your dad or me. We can be relatively patient. If I have a really dismal year, the only person I've got to apologize to really is me. And if I think there's a good reason why we had a bad year, and it was just bad timing rather than negligence, or that we're a bunch of idiots, or we made some bad decisions. And by the way, I make bad decisions all the time. The great thing about owning your own business is, as long as that bad decision doesn't wipe you out, you can get up next morning and say, well, that was a really stupid decision I made. I won't do that again. But at least you had the balls to correct it very quickly and move on and regroup and build it back up again. You don't get that privilege if you're a public company. The bottom line is the market is ferocious. The shareholders are, frankly, ferocious.
When I first met you, you did remind me somewhat of Harry Lonsdale, the porn king from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Well-dressed, dapper, well-spoken, but you look like or may have killed some people with your bare hands. Do you feel? Do you feel that being a hard ass is an important part of being a successful business owner?
Um, isn't it funny? People's perceptions. If you talk to my operations director, she's very, very shrewd woman, very on the ball, and she constantly tells me I'm too damn soft. I, I think there's a lot of room for compassion in business. Strangely enough, I'm probably come across as being pretty ferocious with my competitors, and I'm not really ferocious with them. If I think they're doing a great job and I think they're, you know, good competition and fair competition, I'm okay with it. It's when I see incompetence and a lack of effort that I get quite cross. So, you know, I don't know.
You and Leslie, neither of you suffer fools gladly, and that's a good quality, I think, in a business owner. Maybe that's conflated with hard assness, but I think not suffering fools gladly is a very high quality for a business owner. You can't be that way and be successful, in my opinion.
And look, maybe you're right. I'm old school. The old school in me is, most people, your competitors are your enemy. And I've worked in industries, by the way, where me and competitors, and certainly in the mobile phone industry, we regularly would get together with competitors and have a fantastic time. But as soon as we went home, we were back to being enemies again. So I think that's kind of the old-fashioned way, and maybe that is probably a bit too prominent in my attitude and the way I behave. But as I say, internally in the business, and I've got this real thing as well, is be hard but be bloody fair. And fairness is something that really I care about a lot. So, integrity and fairness, treating people properly, be difficult if you need to be hard if you have to be. And look, in business, occasionally we have to make some really hard decisions, but I'd like to think those decisions were made for the right reasons. But there are human beings involved, and certainly as far as my employees are concerned, or our employees are concerned, there's nothing I wouldn't do to support them any way I can, and we do.
Subscribe to SatNuts, the podcast. Also, rate and review on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, and anywhere fine podcasts are downloaded for free. Audio engineering provided by Ben Klein. Music provided by Bacon Jew. Special thanks to the entire CCOM staff. Stay nuts, everybody.